If you clicked on this video, you're probably wondering how South Korea became one of the most advanced economies in the world. In the 60s, the average South Korean was poorer than the average person in Senegal, Honduras, or the Philippines. In fact, the country had to rely on foreign aid to survive. However, from the 60s to 2020, the economy exploded, growing at a rate of 7% annually, making South Korea now one of the richest nations in the world. And it regularly provides foreign aid to many struggling nations. How did South Korea become prosperous? What was the secret? To answer this, we need to take a look at its history. When the Second World War ended in 1945, Koreans were among the happiest people on earth. The Japanese had occupied and exploited Korea since 1910, and now they were gone. Korea's joy did not last long, however. The peninsula suffered two more disasters. The first was the division of their land into a communist north, supported by China and Russia, and South Korea, which was dominated by the USA. The second was the war between these two Koreas and their allies. More than 2 million Koreans were killed. Both North and South were devastated by the time the war ended in 1953. However, the trauma of the first half of the 20th century laid important foundations for the triumphs of the second half. Wartime refugees fled to the cities, creating an urban labor force for new factories. Land reform in the countryside meant that millions in South Korea now own the land they farmed. These new landowners had the incentive and the stability to be entrepreneurial. They also wanted their children to get an education and a better life. South Korea built thousands of schools after 1953, which provided a highly educated workforce. None of this, however, was enough to jumpstart the South Korean economy, which was still stagnant in 1960. Nor was the $6.6 billion the US gave to its strategically located Asian ally between 1946 and 1978, although American money certainly helped. For comparison, the US gave $6.9 billion to all of Africa during the same period. It was the decisions of the South Korean government after 1960 that made the difference, especially those associated with the president who controlled the country for 15 years after 1963, Park Chung-hee. Park was deeply patriotic, and he was determined that his country would be free of foreign influence. He saw that the only way that would happen was if South Korea was economically strong and self-reliant. He therefore geared the state for rapid growth. The Park government wanted South Korea to be a market-based economy to improve the overall efficiency of the economy. Also, since the country didn't have any natural resources to exploit, the government decided that the nation had to specialize in the production and the export of manufactured goods. Park believed that industrialization was the best path to economic success, and he was right. Factories are almost always more profitable than fields. The Park government started to industrialize the country through a series of 5-year plans which started in 1962, which at first tried to increase the technological abilities of the country. In the beginning, this meant assembling goods designed in Japan and light industries such as wig making. But the results were impressive. The South Korean economy was growing at 9% a year by the mid-1960s, and exports by 29%. As the economy grew, the Park government sought foreign investments to the country. This allowed them to increase their available capital to manufacture more advanced products. Relations with Japan were normalized in 1965, and South Korea benefited greatly from this. They received around $800 million worth of grants as well as access to advanced technology. In 1972, Park, who by this stage had almost dictatorial powers, decided to push the economy towards even more growth. The government invested in heavy industry, steel, petrochemicals, cars, electronics, and shipbuilding. South Korea quickly became a technological power in its own right, not just a place where the Japanese and others could manufacture their creations. The result was even greater profitability for South Korean companies and rising wealth and living standards for almost everyone. South Korea's economic growth during the second half of the 20th century was an extraordinary achievement. However, that growth had its costs. Democracy disappeared while Park was in control. Businesses were free to treat workers poorly as a result. Many people lived in slums. Government support for the vulnerable in society was often lacking. And a group of companies known as the cables emerged, which included Hyundai, Samsung and LG. These mega companies received preferential treatment from the government, such as tax breaks and cheap loans. Their share of the economy increased from 15% to 67% in the decade after 1974. South Korea was successful, but it was hardly an example of free market capitalism. Park deserves credit for recognizing that industrialization was the best way to ensure his country was rich, strong, and secure, and for pursuing this course against the advice of his American allies, who wanted South Korea to make wigs, not circuit boards. Park was assassinated in 1979, after which South Korea slowly became more democratic. Nowadays, the country boasts some of the world's most respected companies, notably Samsung and LG. Although South Korea is prospering today, it is facing a whole new set of challenges. The significant help that the South Korean government gave to the cables have made the country reliant on these huge companies. The existence of these companies creates an oligopoly within the country, making it hard for smaller businesses to survive. You may think that because these companies contribute so much to the economy they would provide a lot of employment too. But this is far from the reality. Cables are now creating fewer jobs and don't hire often. This is one of the reasons why there is a lot of youth unemployment in the country. There are further knock-on effects on birth rate and fertility within the country as young people delay getting married and starting families until they are financially stable. South Korea is very different from the country it was in 1960. It enjoys political liberty, economic success, and a high standard of living, and now it is more important than ever for South Korea to create an environment where small businesses and young people can prosper. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you have enjoyed the video. Have we missed anything out? Let us know in the comments below. Until the next time, peace.